Jonathan, Hartford Baptist Church. Welcome to episode 2 of our study through James. In the previous episode, we just did a kind of a short, very brief introduction to the letter of James, Epistle of James, and we made it through one verse. But one thing that I did want to add that I didn't talk about from verse 1 is you'll notice where it says James, a servant of God, the ESV says, and the net says a slave of God. So we do have a little nuance difference between servant and slave. I don't necessarily know if either one of those are quite capture the meaning of the Greek word. Slave is honestly probably closer because servant sounds like that's the guy who comes and goes as he pleases, more like an employee. Is the way at least I use the word servant and think of the word servant. Kind of think of maids and butlers and things like that. And the slave, because of our American context, our United States of America context, we tend to think of the black slave trade and all those abuses and everything else, and it kind of taints that word. And I've seen some translations and commentaries use the word bond servant there, which really probably captures the meaning better. Especially in the Hebrew version of slavery in the Old Testament, slaves were paid. And often, even into the Roman Empire, even the day when James wrote this, slaves were paid, and slaves often voluntarily did it, sold themselves into slavery for survival. They would be a bond servant. I would sell myself into, if I'm as 90% plus of the population was dirt poor, struggling meal to meal just to get something to eat. Every day was a concern. What am I going to eat today? What am I going to eat today? What am I going to eat today? So some people would sell themselves into slavery for, say, like 7 years. And for that 7 years, I am bound to you as a servant, as a slave, but you gave me X amount of money for this 7 years of service. That money goes to my family to keep my family fed and healthy. When that 7 years is up, I can renew my servitude to you or move on. And I also have the opportunity to buy out my contract. If things go really well and I sold myself to you for, say, $30,000 and all of a sudden, hey, I've worked a couple years, but now I'm good and I've got the money to buy out my contract. You could buy your freedom. So bond servant's probably the better term there. And it also conveys a little bit of this is where you want to be type, where a slave isn't always there by choice, at least not by our American context. A bond servant is there by choice. He may not have wanted to do it at the beginning. He had very good reasons to do what he did. It benefits him. It benefits, it was a beneficial union, so to speak, of his servitude. And that's the exact same word, that doulos, in the Greek that James is using. It is a word for slave, but it is also that bond servant. This is a term that can be used to show mutual benefits. Yeah, we're a slave to God, but there's also a benefit back to us. There's some type of payment we could be getting here. And that's why I think bondservant really captures that better. Of course, what is the benefit? The benefit itself is Christ. The benefit is salvation. The benefit is all those blessings. The benefit is eternity. So just the word slave doesn't capture it well, and a servant just doesn't capture it well. I think of doulos as a bondservant probably does capture what James is intending here better. But moving on from that into verse 2, he says, "Count it all in joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let that steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." All right, we're probably just going to do that one paragraph today, because I think if I hit 5 through 8, it'll be a 20-minute plus episode. So we're just going to do 2 through 4 today, those 3 verses. And there's quite a bit there to talk about. So we got 1, count it all joy, my brothers. So here we got kind of ask stuff like, what is, and of course he's talking about trials of various kinds. Count it all as joy. So all the bad stuff in your life, every bit of it, all the time, I want you to count it as joy. It's not really what James is saying, but we could possibly read it that way. That word all is more of about not about the quantity where we have everything that we meet in life we must always be joyous about. And, someone dies, we need to be joyous about it. We lose our job, we need to be joyous about it, be happy about it. We need to have all these positive thoughts and all these bad things. He is going to tell us where our joy is. The joy is not in the bad things. If you look in verse 3, he tells us why we need to have this joy. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. This is where our joy's at. It's not in the bad stuff per se. It's in the results of the bad stuff. We don't need to be super excited that we've got, if we got cancer, we don't need to be excited we've got cancer. That's not what James is saying here. If we've lost our job, he's not saying we have to be excited and joyous we lost our job. But the joy is rooted in what it's going to produce, what these trials in your life, and I do like the word that trials that the ESV and the Net both use. Some older translations will say temptations, which doesn't capture the full range of the word. Temptations, you think of like, well, that's when we're tempted to sin. These aren't necessarily events. These various kinds of trials aren't necessarily, they could be, but they're not limited to events in your life where you are tempted to sin. These cover a vast variety, various kinds of trials. And those could be just, things I mentioned earlier. Losing your job, getting a bad report from the doctor, these kinds of trials in your life as well. Of course, you got the temptations as well, but it's broader than just temptation. And the joy is, as I said before, is in the testing of our faith, and that testing of our faith is going to produce steadfastness. Steadfastness is a word that perseverance could also be used there. And perseverance is more of that technical term you may be familiar with. That is, staying the course. In the context of salvation, that's remaining in salvation. That's proving you're genuous, which we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Actually, we can go ahead and we'll jump into that right now. Verse 3, he talks about the testing of your faith. There was the Greek word there, that the first one I highlighted in blue, dakimion. I had to look that up. I don't think I've ever read the Epistle of James in Greek and didn't recognize the word. Of course, it is only used 2 times in the entire Scriptures. New Testament, James right here, and then once in 1 Peter. But this word, when I looked it up, I noticed that it is a test, but it is the process or means something, determining the genuineness of something. So the whole purpose of the testing, the whole purpose of these various trials in our life, the Greek word that James has chose emphasizes that the whole purpose of it is to prove your genuineness. It is to determine something is genuine. And whenever we go through these trials and we depend upon God and our faith grows, we grow closer to Him. Our faith is growing in quality, not necessarily quantity. But as we do this, it proves us to be genuine. And we've talked about before at the end of, on those days of judgment, God will be proven to others, not to Himself, but our good works, our steadfastness, our perseverance proves our faith to be genuine. And in that court scene that we kind of in judgment plays out, you see that. We are rewarded for our faith, for our perseverance. And that's what these various trials do. They prove us to be genuine believers. For those in the church that you see go through trials and they've turned away from the church, well, that test of genuineness, they failed. They proved their faith was not genuine. It didn't produce the steadfastness. But in a true believer, trials in your life will produce that steadfastness. Verse 4, and let the steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And the Net translation says, and let the endurance have its perfect effect, and so that you will be perfect and complete, not deficient in anything. The Net does have the benefit of translating perfect and perfect, where basically they've took the same Greek word and translated it the same way. The ESV has done full effect and perfect. I don't necessarily think perfect is correct for either one of these. It can mean that. We got like teleoi, just when it's one of the, which is teleos, man, I can't speak today. And it can mean, and I'll pull up the BDAG lexicon, it can mean, to that highest, meaning the highest standard, to be perfect. Well, let's kind of explore if we think this could be right. We have various kinds of trials in our life, things that are proving our faith genuine, and the end goal, the full goal, the perfect goal, the perfect effect, as the net would say, is to make us perfect and complete. Well, are any of us perfect? Some of us have been through lots of trials in our life. A lot of things, a lot of testing has occurred. Are you perfect yet? Is that what the goal of this is, to make you perfect? I know there's some, even some within the Methodist faith, though I honestly haven't met one. I've read some works of the Methodist Church that imply it, or not imply it, they say it, but I've never actually met one, though I have met some charismatics who have felt that they have achieved the state of perfection, that they are perfect humans, sinless. But honestly, I don't know if I believe that. Actually, I don't believe that. I don't think any of us are perfect. I think no. As the Apostle John says, if we say we have no sin, the truth is not in us. We all have sin. We still have flaws in us, despite all this testing. That what the goal is, to produce this steadfastness, to produce this full effect. So if it's not perfection, what else can teleoi mean? We'll scroll down to option 2, and this is the one that I go with. This is to being mature, full-grown, mature adult. This word is used in the Greek language to basically, when you tell someone to grow up, this is the kind of what you're going to tell them. This we can do if we allow the steadfastness to have its mature effect, or its finishing effect. If we render it that way, allow steadfastness to have its finishing effect, that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. Now, maturity, we can grow in the faith. Maturity is something we can do and we should be doing. That's something Scripture repeats over and over again. Even that letter of Thessalonica, both letters of Thessalonica, they had saving faith. Paul loved their faith, loved the love they were shown, loved their works, but he encouraged them to have more. He encouraged them to push on towards maturity, and just keep growing and growing and growing. That's what this is saying to me here in verse 4. When teleoi is used here, it is talking about that, having that mature, that we are to allow our trials in life to mature us, to make us, to produce that steadfastness, to produce that perseverance, to produce that sanctification, that we may be more of a mature and a more complete Christian. And of course, this goes on to, now we talked about that James is writing to probably his congregation that got scattered throughout the area after the death of Stephen. And James is going to be pastoring his people. He's going to encourage them to grow in the faith. We're going to see that play out in this letter. And that's what I think contextually of the letter, this is more accurate. Because James is asking his people to mature up, to grow up, to become stronger in the faith. You can see right there in verse 5, which we're not going to talk about, but if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask God. He gives them various things throughout this entire book. Talks about controlling the tongue. He's talking about them becoming more mature Christians. That's what this letter is about. And that's how we're approaching this letter. And I think that's, instead of reading perfect, that you may become perfect, that you become mature, that you be mature. I think that's what James is telling his people. And we're going to wrap it up there. We're not going to get into verse 5 through 8. We'll be here another 10-15 minutes if I do. There's a lot there in that verse. You may want to read that ahead of time, or that paragraph, I mean. Read 5 through 8 before tomorrow. There's a lot going on there. And we'll be there for a while. But I will wrap it up there. Just one thing to think about. How are you maturing in the faith? How are you utilizing the trials in your life? Are you using them to grow closer to God? Are you using them to mature? Or are you letting them basically make your life crumble around you? Are you allowing that? How are you doing in that test? Are you proving to be genuine, or are you faltering? Evaluate yourself on that. And until then, I'll see you next episode. God